Hey there, I'm Sherry. Right now I'm living at my folks' place with my 4th grade son and my 2nd grade daughter. Why, you might wonder? Well, my husband, Dwight, the kids' dad, has this irksome habit of barking orders without realizing the blood, sweat, and tears I pour into keeping our home shipshape. It got to the point where he started ignoring us to such an extent that he'd even label our kids brats. I've no use for that kind of husband and dad. The kids, too, aren't exactly fans of a dad who'd blow off the playdates he'd promised them to prioritize his golf and boozing sessions instead. Even with all the broken promises, he would always be grumpy when interacting with our son and daughter who didn't fawn over him. Naturally, that attitude just made them even more distant. But my frets weren't just about my self-absorbed husband.
Hey, Sherry, my house's roof has been springing leaks lately. I'm mulling over some renovations.
My mother-in-law, Teresa, filled me in. Sure, the house she resides in is far from picture perfect. It's a 50-year-old relic that's crumbling fast because she's not exactly a domestic goddess. When her husband Jason was alive, being a corporate bigwig, they hired help to keep the house spick and span. But after he passed, all that came to a halt. You'd think that even after Jason's passing there'd be some inheritance, but all the property, house, and money were all pocketed by Teresa. And the instant she got her hands on the inheritance, she started globetrotting every week. I tried to caution her against splurging so wildly, but she just chuckled, saying,
"How I spend my money is my own business. Are you fretting about the money you'll get when I kick the bucket? Don't sweat, I'm not leaving you guys a dime,"
while plotting her next jaunt. Looking back, I guess I managed to keep my marriage with Dwight afloat and raise our son Ken and daughter Marie, not owing to my husband or Teresa, but likely thanks to Jason. Unlike Dwight, who could care less about his own kids, Jason was always fussing over Ken and Marie. He was the one who would tag along with them to pick and purchase their school bags. It was Jason who filled in to escort them to the theme park when Dwight was knocked out by his lame excuse of a hangover. Ken and Marie were more bonded with their granddad than their real dad. I guess Dwight and Teresa felt like third wheels around my presence and that of my children. Once Jason took his last breath, I lost the one who would watch over the kids when my weekends were tied up with work. When I would nudge Dwight to babysit because I had work, he'd retort,
"Why are you asking me? You've never asked before. Ask my mom."
However, if I tried to rope in Teresa to babysit, she'd snap back.
"Why are you asking me? I didn't sign up for my son's marriage to you to be saddled with this kind of hassle."
I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. They even dodge responsibility in the same way. I just had to shake my head at that. Ultimately, I had to lay bare the situation to a mom friend, whose kids always played well with mine, and she agreed to look after my little ones until I could scoot back from work. She was super understanding and told me, "I know it's rough on you. We gotta have each other's backs when we're in a pinch." Her words were a massive weight off my shoulders. It boggled my mind that strangers were nicer to my kids than my husband or mother-in-law. Shouldn't parents be head over heels for their kids? Shouldn't grandparents dote on their grandkids? Acknowledging this fact hit me with how off base Dwight and Teresa truly were. Even though Teresa knew I was grinding away on my day off and couldn't pitch in to babysit, she didn't bat an eyelid about blowing up my phone, piling on messages like, "Hey, remember that leak we chatted about? I really need you to swing that remodel soon, okay?" She probably would have tackled the remodel herself if she had any of Jason's inheritance left. But the fact that she's tapping me, her daughter-in-law, hints she must have burnt through all the money he left her. And judging by her reaching out to me instead of her own son, I'm guessing she's clued in to his penny-pinching ways. He's miserly with everyone. Even when the kids pipe up about wanting to hit the amusement park, he counters with,
"They're so tiny. There's barely anything they'd be tall enough to ride. It'd be a total waste."
And he won't fork over a dime. If it were only about leisure and entertainment, I'd let it slide. But when it's about essential school supplies, he still chimes in with,
"I'm not splurging on what I don't deem necessary."
We needed basics like gym clothes and crayons, but he put his foot down about paying for them. When I pointed out that the kids wouldn't be able to join in class activities without them, He nonchalantly said,
"We don't have the bucks to toss around on such stuff. If you give the teacher a heads up, they'll likely scrounge up stuff from other kids."
Talk about an insouciant thing to say. I'm the one juggling the household budget. He has never footed the bill for anything beyond the rent. We do have 2 kids, so I've squeezed out some contribution towards the grocery bills, but he's still tight-fisted with his cash. I guess he's just not wired for family life. Teresa likely has her son's character pegged pretty well, so she's trying to coax me, her daughter-in-law, into coughing up the bucks instead of her skinflint son. Even when I warn her that I can't reply due to work, she doesn't give a hoot and keeps firing off texts. And the subject of her messages keeps ramping up like,
I was browsing this remodeling company's website. I think we should roll with them. Can you take care of the contract? I'm strapped for cash after all.
Personally, if she can't take the reins of her own finances, she should just drop the remodel idea. Plus, instead of trying to fix up a house that's been beaten down by neglect over 50 years, it might be smarter to raise the house and lease a new apartment. That seems like it would be more cost-effective in the long run. I was antsy she'd ring up the remodeling company on her own, so I shot her a message saying, "If you keep this up, I won't fork over a single penny." That put the brakes on her texts out of the blue. Thinking we needed a heart-to-heart, I wrapped up my work on my day off and headed to the standalone house she resides in. She welcomed me with a beet red face and blurted out,
How could you send me a message like that? You'll have to cover the entire cost of the remodel.
I knew she had her sights set on having me foot the whole bill from the get-go. After all, she's flat broke. I'm even the one picking up the tab for the property taxes for this house. Dwight, though it's his folks' house, has passed the buck to me. "Teresa, do you really want to stay in this rickety house even after the remodel?" I questioned. She looked taken aback, her face still flushed. I guess she didn't grasp what I was driving at. "Wouldn't you rather nest somewhere fresh? You'd have a leak-free place without needing a remodel, and you wouldn't have to spruce up such a massive house," I proposed, and her eyes sparked up. She probably thought I'd be shouldering the whole bill. Well, I doubt Dwight would part with any cash anyway, so it's inevitable. It's better than her hiring a remodeling company alone. I can't let the kid's grandma end up behind bars for not footing the bill for a remodel, so I opted to cover the rent and let Teresa move into an apartment. She promised she'd hand over the land and house to me, so I resolved to knock down the ramshackle house. I did spill the beans to my husband, but he was either texting someone or lost in a game on his smartphone and didn't seem to be tuned in to me. I realized that he wouldn't genuinely listen when it came to money matters, so I didn't waste breath trying to make him understand. Then 3 months later, something unfolded. Believe it or not, Dwight went and blew the money I'd been tucking away in a bank account for Ken and Marie at a hostess bar. It was money that I had been carefully saving up for their future, since they'd soon be moving on to middle school, high school, and eventually college.
How could you do such a thing? I never shared the PIN number.
I caught a glimpse of it when you were shifting funds.
Whoa, hold on. That's not cool.
Give me a break. We're hitched. Your earnings are also mine. Plus, you've been stashing money under the pretense of savings, but I'm sure it's from the cash you've been siphoning from me each month.
Even after he dishes out money, it's barely enough to cover the rent and fill the fridge. But it seems like he somehow conjured up the notion that he was holding us up and even socking away money on his salary. Are you kidding me? I can't save money from what you hand me. The money I saved is from me diligently.
Quit the harping. I've been thinking, why should I support a woman I don't have feelings for anymore and kids who aren't even cute? From now on, I won't fork over a single cent to you guys.
After hearing him spit out such words, I felt my patience snap inside. I realized he didn't give a hoot about me or the kids, which pushed me to think enough is enough. I can't stand this life anymore. I'm heading back to my folks' place, I declared, glaring at him. But he just smirked and retorted.
Fine. Take the brats with you. And sign the divorce papers.
He then slid the divorce papers, already inked with his signature, my way. I guess he'd been mulling over divorce for a bit. I heaved a sigh. Being hitched to such a man would only stymie the kids' development. I don't need a guy who raised the money I've saved for the kids. With that thought, I quickly pulled myself together. If you're angling for a divorce, you'd better refund all the money you splurged. If not, I'll sue you. I'll clue in my lawyer about you draining our savings. I'll also spill the beans to the person who set us up and who's on your office team. And my folks, too. At that point, he seemed to think it was more of a headache to tackle everyone's remarks than to reimburse me. He scowled, irked, but conceded.
All right, I get the picture. You want your dough back, right? Such a royal pain.
I'll ink the divorce papers once I verify the funds have landed in my personal account, I stipulated. The next day, he hit the bank and wired the money into my account. The fact he could square up in full right away suggests he had a decent amount in his account, yet he still dipped into the kids' savings. Clearly, he's not cut out to be a dad. I signed off on the divorce papers, scooped up the kids, and booked it straight back to my parents' place. En route, I swung by the city office to lodge the divorce papers. Just like that, Dwight and I were history. He waived his parental rights, so we've cut all ties with Dwight and Teresa. I spilled everything to my parents before I landed home. Turns out, they'd been fretting about us all along, and instantly urged me to come back. As soon as I touched base home, I rang up a real estate agent. Technically, Dwight was footing the bill for the house we had bunked in, so that stayed as is. But I had been coughing up the rent for the apartment Teresa bunked in, so I kicked off the process to pull the plug on that lease. I'd also been covering her cell phone bill, so I resolved to cancel that as well. I figured I won't be hearing from her anymore. The real estate agent happened to be a buddy, so I managed to pass a message along to Teresa that read, "Since we're divorced now, I won't cover the rent anymore. If you need a hand, hit up your son." According to an acquaintance at the real estate office, she was reluctant to vacate the apartment. I suppose a life where everything's catered to her without lifting a finger might have been pretty cushy for her. But they let her know that if she hung around any longer, they'd have to call the police. So with a bit of a huff, she gathered her things and made a beeline for her son's place. I couldn't help but think, man, he's probably gonna flood me with messages. And sure enough, after a long day on the grind, I noticed I had 55 missed calls on my cell. Turns out my phone was buried deep in my bag and I hadn't noticed. It kind of creeped me out how persistent he'd been trying to reach me. So, I decided to check out the voicemails.
Hey, what on earth is happening? Why is Mom dropping in at my place? She's saying she's been turfed out because her old pad doesn't exist anymore and you've pulled the plug on her apartment.
If he'd pieced together that much of the conversation, he should have quickly cottoned on that since we're divorced, there's no rationale for me to be footing the bill for his mom anymore. But he just kept tossing blame my way.
Find a place for Mom to crash, stat. I'm not signing up to bankroll her.
Even though it's his own mom, I was floored at what he was spouting. Honestly, he should be thankful that I'm not hounding him for a refund for all the money I've shelled out on her over the years. But I bet he couldn't care less about the bucks I've dished out. He's just that sort of man. I headed home without returning his call. The next day, I scrapped my old cell and upgraded to a new one. There's zero chance Dwight will manage to reach me now. And even if he takes a crack at it, his messages won't reach me. I bet he's sweating bullets right about now. With the money he used to chip in for the house, he can only cover rent and grub. He's still on the hook for utilities and a slew of other bills. And to top it all off, he now has Teresa, a freeloading woman who can't make it on her own and doesn't have a penny to her name, shacking up with him. He'll be shelling out even more money than he used to. Maybe he would have been happier if I had stuck around. But hey, what can you do? He was the one who kicked that life to the curb. I couldn't help but crack a smile imagining him in a full-blown flap. A month down the line, Dwight finally twigged that I'd switched my phone number and pitched up at my parents' place. But I had already planned for that move too. While it was okay for him to drop by, I was nervous he might upset the kids, so I swiftly found a new pad and wrapped up the move. The new apartment is a fortress when it comes to security, so there's no chance of him showing up. Since I was off the hook for their care, I relocated to a slightly swankier place. When Dwight landed at my parents' place, he blurted out,
Go get Sherry right now. If she hightails it back home now, I'll let bygones be bygones.
My dad was too flabbergasted to even get steamed, but my mom couldn't help but crack up and shot back.
Why should she scamper back to a jobless ex-husband and support a leeching mother-in-law? That's a one-way ticket to hell. Especially when you can't even properly look after 2 kids.
It seems he beat a hasty retreat, his face beet red with embarrassment. My mom hit the nail on the head. Dwight didn't have the guts to pay my folks another visit, but believe it or not, this time he stormed my workplace. Well, I saw that one coming a mile off too. I had already laid out the whole scene to my boss and switched to working from home, so I dodged the bullet of confronting my ex-hubby, who barreled into the office. But despite the receptionist repeatedly telling him I wasn't at work, he spat out,
You're all probably shielding her. I'm camping right here until she pops up.
And plopped down right in front of the reception desk. And surprisingly, Teresa, who he'd roped in, showed up halfway through and parked herself beside him at reception. This is nothing short of disrupting business. Since I've cut ties with him, I told my boss to alert the authorities if anything kicks off. So my boss didn't waste any time reporting it to the police. And just like that, the cops who were quick on the scene hauled both of them off. My boss and I were absolutely shocked. Even for Dwight, we never pegged him for pulling a stunt like this. You see, he was originally a contact from one of our company's clients, and as luck would have it, I was the one assigned to him. We met up a whole bunch, and he kept putting the moves on me until we eventually tied the knot. The guy who played Cupid was a big shot at his company, so Dwight's split from me was definitely going to smudge his good name. On top of that, causing a ruckus for a client, let's just say this is going to be one major headache down the line. True to my hunch, I got a call from the matchmaker. He was dying to get the full scoop, so we set up a meet at a coffee shop with my boss to hash it all out.
I can't believe he'd pull a move like this,
The matchmaker let out.
Truth be told, I was really tight with his old man when we were younger. But to get a knife in the back like this?
He was genuinely taken aback. I felt for the guy. Dwight's dad, Jason, had been a real gem to me too. After that, the matchmaker and I spent some time swapping stories about how awesome Jason had been. Once we'd had our fill of strolling down memory lane about Jason, we finally got down to brass tacks about how to handle Dwight.
Let's be real. Dwight's got quite a rep at the office. He's always sticking his higher-ups with the tab at social outings, and even does the old dine and dash. He wouldn't even think about picking up the tab for his juniors, and if someone brought back goodies from a paid vacay, he'd hoard all of them even though they're for the crew.
Hearing this, I couldn't help but blurt out, wow. So his penny-pinching ways weren't just at home. He was tight-fisted through and through, yet he had the nerve to splash out at hostess clubs and dip into someone else's stash. I was speechless. This kind of behavior is probably why folks give him a wide berth.
All this while, out of respect for his dad, I've been picking up his slack, but that ends now. He's stirring the pot with the companies we do business with, and even getting the cops mixed in. We can't have folks like that on our team. Leave it all to me,
He declared as he took off. Later, I got a progress report from him. After Dwight was sprung by the police, the company laid it on the line. Either get shipped off to a remote branch or quit. Unable to afford the loss of his job, he supposedly upped sticks to a more regional spot with his mother. I got the lowdown that he won't be able to get near us or crash our company ever again. As for me, I've put him and his mom out of my mind, and now I'm living the quiet life with my 2 kiddos.